2010 Mercedes C300 4MATIC. We're going to be replacing lower control arm, upper control arm, sway bar links, sway bar bushings, shocks and springs. I guess we're going to be replacing it with an assembly, as well as the axle, which is pretty much rounding that up to entire suspension. Only thing that we're not going to be replacing is steering rack knuckle, which is easy on its own. It's like you're going to need a special tool for it. But otherwise, it's accessible. You can just remove it anytime after you remove the wheel. So this is our starting point. Apparently, we have our fender removed, the piece of plastic right here. This includes the front portion, the middle portion that goes under the engine, as well as the rear portion. And this one is going to give us access to the bushing, the sway bar bushing. The video is going to be starting here for the reason if you can remove the wheel or this plastic, you probably shouldn't even do this job. It's not that complicated, but there's a lot of steps that involve to do pretty much replacing any of these components. Specifically for the lower or upper control arms, they require for you to remove the axle, which is kind of annoying because you're gonna need to bust this nut right here. This is gonna be quite tedious job with many things to disassemble and many things to reassemble. That's pretty much it for the intro. Let's hop right in and start this assembly. I generally start with the easiest stuff. The link stabilizer, it's going to be held with 18 mil and T40. So with that, what I'm going to do is basically going to use my pliers and hold the nut this way, and we'll try to screw the middle portion in. Okay, that was fairly easy to do so, but you only want to do that if you know that you're not going to be reusing the link. Apparently apply a lot of spinning force onto the inner element, and potentially this can damage the inner part of the ball joint, which is, like I said, in our case, it doesn't matter because we are replacing them. For the bottom one, we actually have more access, and now we can use a wrench in combination with T40 socket, the star socket. Oh. Oh. And this is hell of a tight. And it's spinning already. So we'll use the wrench and the ratchet, and now it's released. The next part is going to be breaking loose all of the nuts. We'll be starting with the hub side or the ball joints. We're going to need a special tool like a fork or the press tool to actually release them. And then we're going to move to the body side. Same as for lower control arm here as well. So those apparently are 22 mil nut, and we want to bust them loose, which is going to be quite a challenge. Probably would be an ideal scenario to use some PP Blaster or WD-40, but I'll use a wrench in combination with the pipe, and just like that. And that was super easy. The power tool made it happen that it just pop out, as you can see. And again, we're not going to be reusing any of those. We have a new parts. We'll jump on this one next. So for this one in particular, I'm gonna need to use the tool, which is going to be hammered. Always trying to be careful with this tool, because sometimes it just spring out or just pop it out, or the arm itself will shoot up. So make sure you're not going to be putting any of your fingers here, somewhere around it. Whoa, I can't hear now. Okay, success. Now we have a E20 socket, which goes on one side, and 21 mil nut goes on other side. Which doesn't really give me... Oh, it does work. All of that is good, but I forgot the main dish. Apparently you're supposed to undo that boss stud first before anything is moving. Basically when the wheel is actually on. So you can pop the cap and then undo that nut or the bolt. but we're gonna be doing it right now. So wanna have a screwdriver, shove it into the water, then take our E24. Ideally take a breaker bar, which I don't have, but I do have a longer pipe. Make sure it's all the way in. Hardcore version. Again, making sure it's all there. And yes, look at that, how easy it was. Nice. And now it's moving freely. So in some cases, we're gonna need a special tool, which is apparently this guy. You bolt it on, you get your pushing bolt, you screw it in, but this style is a lot easier. Apparently we don't need the press tool. Although if it's been sitting there for quite a long time, you're probably gonna need one. So suggestion to prepare and get one. I'll get you the link in the description below for this particular one. In our case, it all worked out really well. The next part for us is gonna be lower control arm. That is E20. And again, we have our 21 mil. Hopefully this time we're just going to get it straight up. And this one is not as tight. On top of that, it's really long. So that's gonna be another thing. And this is the nut right here. Both of the bolts from lower and upper control arm would have a washer on both sides. Also, the bolt will be interfering with the steering rack, but it's just enough clearance to actually squeeze it through. And that just like that. Also, the rust on the end side of the bolt, you want to clean it. So I'm generally using a WD-40 and metal brush and just brush it around. Now we can remove a lower control arm. You basically push it down from that side and kind of pop it out. Earlier we would break the bolt loose. Now we can fully unscrew it. We're going to be reusing that. Mercedes manual actually suggesting you to replace it, but I mean, personally, I generally reuse them. Also, as you can see, this part is moving. Now the whole assembly can be moved, and you can see it just wiggling and wobbling. At this point, I'm going to push out the axle and squish it down and slide it to the side. You can see clearly why do we replace those, because the boot was broken and it's got a whole bunch of grime and dirt inside. As this is out, we probably can pop this side since it's cracked. If it's not cracked and the seal is there, you don't need to remove this side. Stop here. If you're not replacing the axle, just keep it together. But if you do replace the axle, I would probably suggest you to do something like that, where only the cup is left there. So now we need to slide this bastard out, and the easiest way is going to be from under the car. So this is that cup from other side, and what we need to do is basically use some pray bar and pop that out. So this is the passenger side or the right side. This one just specifically for this part. I'm gonna use a clamp. Hopefully I'll be able to screw that in. Try to make it as tight as possible. Get the pray bar. I have the long one. We're gonna pop it underneath and yank it out. Yes! Oh, we can see in the transmission, make sure you clean this up. If you see that the oil is coming out before you remove the axle and you see this like accumulation of the oil, this is the seal right here that you're gonna need to replace. Make sure you wipe that clean before installing the new one. This is like a penetrating oil, but it can be any type of oil. Just spray it on the rack. The only thing, it's gotta be safe for the rubber. I have some assembly grease on it. And it seems like it pops in. Okay, it's sitting. Before replacing the shock, we actually need to install some of the support, and that's gonna be arms, new axle, basically both of the arms and new axle. And then we're gonna be able to remove the shock or the spring itself for the assembly actually. Make sure you clean all the surfaces. For example, those pieces can be just scrubbed a little. Upper control arm go first before the axle installation, and then we'll install the axle. Make sure to put a little bit of grease inside, that is, have a nice and smooth reunion. I think this is in. Pop the axle in. Should be able to swivel a little. We can put the bolt for it now. At this point, we can continue with installing the arms, which we're gonna pop all the screws. We have our washer and we have our nut. Also, as you can see, we have a hex socket in the ball joint, and the upper control arm has a star. For the reason they both from different companies, but that doesn't really change anything. Although you're gonna need to use wrench probably in combination with the hex to hold the head from spinning while you're going to be tightening the nut. We're going to need to break these two bolts for the shock. Those are also 21 mil. And the opposite side is actually E18. Again, for this, I'm going to be using a breaker bar, which is the pipe, because those are extremely tight. Nice.
Nice.
Pipes makes magic pipes. That's insane. This is hot. And I didn't even use the impact gun. That's what we call it, cooking. Okay, so we're still going to reuse that bolt, but we're gonna need to clean that. So there's just enough space to actually fit the driver in there. The least but not last thing is basically the wires. They're gonna be clamped to this plastic piece, which is we need to remove, and we have a little rivet that we need to pop it out. This part as well. The last piece is gonna be the E12, also the cap. So I broke them both. Basically have these pieces that clamps down on, and through that hole you need to push them and kind of lever them. Now we can remove 3 E12 to remove the shock. And just like that, slide this bastard out. Also, just a suggestion, take a look on how the 3 bolts was positioned toward the bottom part, and make sure they kind of set up on the new piece the same way, and positioning the head the same way it was an original part. If you have an extra pair of hands, that definitely gonna be helpful, since somebody can put the screws in while you holding that bastard. That I use the help of power tool, which is going to make the job a lot easier. And just like that. We'll torque them a little later on. As for this little bastard, perfect. Now I'm just going to basically, we'll screw the lower and upper control arm bolts, but I'm not gonna tie them up, because we're gonna need to preload the suspension, and we're gonna do that as a last step after assembling everything. Okay, so it's quite loose there. Again, we'll torque it up. And now we can torque. And for the link installation, we're just gonna need to raise it up the suspension a little bit. Don't use this jack to preload the suspension or anything. It will shoot out, it will jump out, the car will fall, or something bad gonna happen. So this step is only for the link, and we're going to raise it just a little bit to be able to install the link. But before that, we wanted to pop this piece of plastic back. So in this case, if you use the torque gun, you might get away without spinning the core if it's brand new link, but generally you want to hold it from behind, or some of them gonna have a star socket inside and you're still gonna need to use the ratchet. But in this particular scenario, it's quite gimmicky to get something inside, and you're gonna need a special socket for that job. Let's install the second one. So that's what it called preload the suspension. Apparently we put the wheel back on the hub, put the 3 screws in, so it's not fully seated yet. Also, we remove the cap. We're going to torque that bolt in a minute. When we set the car on the ground, we want to tighten this bolt from upper and lower control arm. In that case, the rubber boot inside will not be span, or actually it's going to be leveled. This is most important step to have your suspension reliable. Because if you're not going to do that, the rubber piece going to end up being like this. You can see the cracks along the bottom side. Also, this side is basically destroyed. It's ripped off. So I'm assuming the shop that was doing replacing this arm, because it was replaced like 4 or 5 months ago, and now it's destroyed. That's what they probably skipped the step with preloading suspension, and the core was under the tension all the time, so it was span, and that's why it ripped off. Because both sides have exactly the same problem. This one is visibly have no cracks, but you can see it being span in the middle, and the rubber is destroyed. So preloading suspension, generally people would use the jack stand or the actual jack and lift, I guess, the hub with the spring up while the car is on the jack. But in our case, we have enough space to actually lock the bolts, not necessarily torque them, because right now we're gonna need to raise the car again and torque all the bolts to the spec. In any case, the last one is gonna be the axle bolt. So I'm using a blue Loctite. Do not use the red one, because whoever gonna be working after you, they're gonna have a really bad day. Hopefully this is going to be enough. And I'll do good and tight here. Very tight. And we're done. Installing the plastic and the wheel, and then we'll go for a test drive.